does a video game city or town need to be to earn the favor of you, the player? Does it have to be realistically designed? Does it have to have some kind of special significance in the story or world in which it resides? Does it need to feel cool or cozy in some way? Maybe you just like it to be a functional hub of information and resources. So for a few years now, I've been delving deep into the characters that inhabit the wide world of video games. But long have I felt a void and a craving to dig also into this, the very brick and mortar that make up all of these countless virtual worlds. Places that are beacons of storytelling, game design, world building, and developer philosophy. I am talking about the towns and cities, yes, but also the multiplayer maps, the starting zones, the nature, hub areas, spaceships, whole planets, and really just any place that we are dropped into as the player. So welcome, one and all, to the very first entry in the Worldpedia, and today I'm hoping you'll join me on a little journey. A journey to the familiar land of Tamriel, the setting of the Elder Scrolls series, because where else were we going to start this thing off, baby? This is a landscape and fictional universe that has been built out over decades, across half a dozen or more games, with thousands upon thousands of points of interest that we could take a look at. So where the hell should we start? Well, I think I have just the place. Whiterun is a rock-solid pillar of the experience of any Skyrim playthrough, a home base of sorts, a centrally located and compact municipality that has its fair share of colorful characters and engaging quest lines, while boasting fantastic and interesting in-game lore dating back thousands of years, and appropriately, this city acts as a backdrop to so many big moments during the main events of the game. But it also, somewhat cleverly, is an introductory springboard to many aspects of the gameplay. And even over a decade later, this is still the place I think of when I think of Skyrim. Now, before we get fully started, as always, I want to give a massive thank you to my patrons for supporting my channel away from YouTube. It really does help me out a lot, and all of you are greatly appreciated. I am Ghost, your host as always, and without further ado...
Do you get to the Cloud District very often?
Excuse me.
Oh, what am I saying? Of course you don't.
I'm trying to start
I earn my way to the top.
Listen, not right now, all right?
I actually advise
shut up,
the Jarl
shut up,
political
Nazim.
matters.
Well, I think before anything else, we should cover the history of this place. How does the game, Skyrim, justify its existence, its placement? Who built it in the lore, and what made it what it is when we mosey on in? Well, I believe one of the great strengths of the Elder Scrolls series has always been its sense of the past. Much like the real world, no place, no city just exists because. This is a fantasy universe built on millennia of fictional history, myth, and song, and practically everywhere you go openly wears that history, giving the entire world a real feeling of authenticity, age, and magic. Well, with any long-standing city, it most likely at one point began with settlers, right? Founders, individuals who discovered this spot and thought to themselves, yeah, let's park it right here. So for Whiterun, the founders were none other than members of the legendary Ysgramor's company, thousands of years before the game takes place in the Merethic era. Ysgramor is a massive character when it comes to the early days of Skyrim's history. Some call him the first human to rule over the territory, and it's really his exploits and life that established the foundation of Nordic culture and identity as we the players know it. So much of this Nord lore is inspired heavily by our very own Norse myth and history here on Earth, and so these ancient men arrived from their home continent of Atmora in probably just the way you'd expect given that, on big-ass Viking ships. Ysgramor and his 500 companions were fleeing civil war back home and seeking a new destiny in an unknown land. Little did they know that it was a land inhabited by Mer, aka elves, and more specifically, an entire kingdom of snow elves. But hey, that's nothing a massive war can't fix, right? Maybe a little genocide thrown in there? But let me tell you, colonizing a foreign land, it's tough work, and it takes a lot more than just one man to take charge of such a thing. Thus, Ysgramor entrusted much to his so-called servant circle of captains, the men that commanded each of the vessels in the arriving fleet. One of his most beloved in that circle was a very close friend named Yeek of the River, who captained the mighty ship known as the Jorvaskr. After the Atmorans gained the area to the north of Sarthal in this war, those captains were sent out with their crews to kind of scout out the land, cause a little trouble, conquer, and put down some permanent roots. And it was the mighty Yeek of the River that took his company toward the heart of the territory. At some point during this trek, a scout in his crew with the incredible name of Yonder the Tiny reported back that between a grassy tundra and Great River, he had discovered something very strange. A stone statue of a bird with a smoldering flame at its feet. When Yeek at last laid his own eyes on this statue, it enchanted him, but he felt a little bit uneasy about the area, seeing as it was one of the only they had encountered that was completely devoid of any elf settlements. But during the war, Yeek had amassed a few captive snow elves, and when they saw the bird, they shuddered in fear, claiming that no elves came near this place, that it was cursed, and the statue likely predated any elven history period in the province. So that's good news for Yeek, right? Elves hate it here, sounds like the absolute perfect place to set up for a while. But this bird, this flame, it's something potentially older than any civilization in history. Some information in the lore considers this to be a well of magic and power as old as the planet Nirn itself. A physical relic of the initial shaping of the mortal plane. I mean, it's some mysterious stuff no matter how you slice it. But for the Atmorans' purposes, it served as both an icon of dominance over the Snow Elves, as well as a uniquely powerful flame to fuel a forge, which was then used to craft a new powerful form of steel. We know it in the present day, in-game, as the Skyforge. So it was here that Yeek brought his mighty vessel at last to rest, using it to construct a great mead hall for his people that still stands today. Here he and his companions settled, content with growing old in a new world that they had taken for themselves. And in the years that followed, a small settlement began to spring up around the hall. The war against the elves was won, and soon it blossomed even more, attracting people from all over seeking a fresh start away from the brutal blizzards of the far north. I really think this central location, though, in proximity to the southern border, made it a prime spot for that kind of natural growth. Trade was pretty good, the weather was pretty good, and life was pretty good. Definitely not a bad place to settle down whatsoever. Eventually, as all men do, Yeek and his crew passed into legend, along with the other 500 companions. But Whiterun never forgot them, and very proudly maintained the original mead hall, as well, of course, as the Skyforge. At an unknown time in its history, this settlement earned its name from the nearby river, also known as the White River, which of course ran right through the area. And just like the other early Nord cities, it was a Jarl, a sort of chieftain and leader that would rule over Whiterun, charged with protecting the locals, managing trade, and dealing with any conflict that may arise. Worth noting too that Whiterun is simply the capital city of the Nordic hold of this area, known conveniently as Whiterun Hold. This is a huge piece of territory that makes up pretty much all of central Skyrim, but in this video, we're mostly talking about this city, so we ain't too worried about all of that. Over the centuries that followed, Whiterun endured a ton. Wars, political conflicts, other world events. Now, of course, some of those events helped to shape and change the city, but we will get to that later when we reach those relevant points of interest. I just think this origin story is really sick. It definitely feels like something pulled straight out of Norse myth, and I think, for me anyway, Nordic lore in the Elder Scrolls always hits. It's very appealing, and usually pretty good. Well, let's now move on to Whiterun proper, the place itself that we visit in-game. Any big, epic virtual world is going to naturally have a place or a few places that feel like home, a place you can go to be safe and chill between things. I think this is extremely important, especially in open world games where we really need that sort of touchstone so we don't feel like we're wandering forever. And it seems to me, for everyone who has played Skyrim, that place is Whiterun. In the intro to this video, I mentioned that the city itself is, well, kind of an intro. And what that means is that the very design of Whiterun sometimes prioritizes convenience above all else, possibly to a fault, but I believe that this is all absolutely intentional. But first, we need to dig into how we are brought here. So at the beginning of the game, you start off as a prisoner, being transferred over the Skyrim border for execution. But of course, Alduin attacks. Shout out to him for saving your life. Things go off the rails and you escape to the town of Riverwood. There you are trusted to be a messenger, tasked with warning the Jarl of Whiterun about this threat of the dragons and asking for some aid. So you pull up, go through a series of get-to-know-yous, and are soon sent on your very first quest into a dungeon to get this dragon burial site map. Then bang, right when you come back, you're forced to join the city defenses to fight off a dragon attack at a nearby watchtower, and by doing that, you reveal yourself not only as Dragonborn, but instantly become a Whiterun legend. You're then offered the title of Thane, you can purchase a home in town, you get a personal donkey to carry your stuff for you. Keep in mind, this is all within the first 2 hours or less of the game. And it is finally at this moment right here, I've always felt like the introduction of Skyrim is over. Like they could throw the logo up in the sky and tell you it's now gamer time. You're free to go do whatever. But Whiterun plays a vital role in that entire sequence. It really is your temporary home, where you are likely buying and selling items, grabbing some potions, some gear, maybe even poking around in the taverns, listening to a song or two, getting hints at other quest lines and learning about other characters. You get so used to it that you will begin to ritualistically slam your head into the swinging sign of war maidens. Don't believe me? You will do this, I promise. It's likely where we learn how to smith, enchant, perform alchemy, haggle, murder innocent people, join factions, gain reputation. And I personally, back in the day, would only ever turn off my game if my Dragonborn dude was physically in Whiterun, so he felt safe and sound back home. And with the modern convenience of fast travel, I would not be shocked if pretty much all of us, later on in the game, didn't instinctively return here to do bartering and whatnot between activities.
Oh shit. Here we go again.
That first player house I mentioned, Breeze Home, dirt cheap compared to the other houses you can buy, and the upgrades are really inexpensive too. Whiterun just straight up sets you up. And while the introductory nature of the city is certainly a part of this attachment that the player will build, I think it's also due to that compact design that I mentioned. This city has absolutely everything you're gonna need. You zone in, boom, you got a forge and a blacksmith right there. Walk 1 foot more, there's your player house with storage. End of the street, general goods, alchemy, supplies, food, etc. Go up to Dragon's Reach for enchanting and magical stuff. Hell, you can even do a drive-by disease curing on your way there at the shrine. It's just so easy to be here and remember where everything is. Compare this to another Skyrim city. Let's just say Markarth. Holy smokes, boys. Listen, I love Markarth. In many ways, I think it is cooler than Whiterun, but where am I right now? Where's Bellathor? Oh my god. And I would be crazy if I did not mention how in the middle of the map Whiterun is. That odds are you're gonna get a quest marker in an undiscovered area that is most convenient to set out toward from here. All roads in Skyrim lead to Whiterun, baby. The more you play, the more you realize how true that really is. It honestly seems to be the perfect player city for all the reasons that the Nords came here to settle in the lore. It's safe, got good trade, and moderate weather. It's just simply good enough. I really should have mentioned this at the beginning of the video, but you are actually able to visit Whiterun in the very first Elder Scrolls game ever made, Arena. But if you have only played Skyrim, you won't necessarily feel at home, because this is physically a completely different place. Arena came out back in '94, just like yours truly, and a lot of the cities feel quite uniform and samey, but very much more city-like. Streets, tall buildings, alleyways, courtyards with fountains, and I mean this Whiterun is absolutely massive by comparison. Multiple stores, taverns, tons of NPCs, guilds. In many ways, it puts our Skyrim variant to absolute shame, but definitely lacks the character and verticality of its modern version. I don't know, it's cool to look back and compare these two 17 years apart. I personally will never forget the first time I was playing this game back in high school. Coming out of the mountain pass to the east, seeing these vast fields of yellowed grass and Whiterun, reaching up to touch the sky. And in that moment, all I could think was, wow, it's fucking Rohan from Lord of the Rings, and that's Edoras. That's illegal, you can't do that. Now listen, I know I'm not alone in this. Look at this, look at this. The inspiration is extremely obvious, down to the color palette and kind of general layout of the area. But man, does it work so well in-game here, and it feels like a tasteful homage opposed to any sort of copycatting. That feeling of vast open space broken up by this dramatically stacked little city is fantastic, and it's most definitely a wonderful use of the sense of scale present in this game. The city itself is walled in, fortified. In fact, it's extremely secure. Huge walls line the heart of it, with a moat, drawbridge, and battlements leading up to the civilian gates. Then there are these farms, meaderies, stables, watchposts, and traders dotting the surrounding area, which I think gives Whiterun a really nice organic feeling to it as you approach and get closer and closer. But once you get inside, the city is surprisingly small and very cozy, I might add. Nothing here is designed in straight lines or grids, but instead soft curves and ovals, a very organic vibe for sure. As if the rock platform that Whiterun is built on is what dictated all of these twists and turns. It has a really nice flow to it as you walk around. But there are distinct areas here in town, as it is broken up into 3 main named districts. The very first is the Plains District. This is where you enter, and it is the lowest point of Whiterun. It's made up of merchants, the guard barracks, taverns, and a player home. You can think of it as like a little commercial area. Next, there is the Wind District, a little higher up. This is where you find the original mead hall, the founding building of Whiterun, which now acts as the home of the Companions, a guild of warriors that honor the past and fight for the present. The Wind District also has pretty much all of the residential buildings for the locals, and of course, the Gildergreen. The Gildergreen is very cool. It seems to take some inspiration also from The Lord of the Rings and Gondor's White Tree, and other Norse myth stuff as well. But it is a sapling cut from the Eldergleam tree, which some say is the oldest living thing possibly in all of Tamriel, and it is an icon of worship for followers of Kine. This relates to the nearby temple, and the Gildergreen was planted very, very early in Whiterun's history. It's a cool thing. It adds, again, some of that history, that magic. And finally, you have the Cloud District, the top level of Whiterun and the smallest of the 3 that houses Dragon's Reach. This is the Jarl's Long Hall and one of the most important buildings, really, in all of Skyrim. You really could make an entire video about just this place alone. It's got so many cool nooks and crannies, maximum cozy gamer time in here, man. Honestly, one of my favorite parts of the entire city for sure. But this very basic structure, an ascending design from the common rabble and drunkards up to the nobles and leadership, I find extremely classic. It seems like humans, since the beginning of time, have been constructing cities for the rich and powerful to be physically higher up. You know, clear horizon, fresher air, away from the stank and the horse stalls and what have you. But the distinction between these 3 districts is nicely executed. It's clear where you are and when you have moved between them, and there are a couple characters who remind you constantly where you don't get too often. Now, I would also say, in my humble opinion, that the visual style of Whiterun is very damn pleasant as well. Cobblestone streets, hand-carved wood, yellow tile roofs, this color palette blends perfectly into the surrounding landscape. Could do with a few trees though. Imagine the sun exposure you'd be getting out here year-round. Yeesh. But I want to specifically give some love and attention to the architecture here and how it's related to in-game lore. So every region of this game has a unique look and feel to the buildings. This is especially true with the bigger cities like Whiterun, Solitude, Markarth, and a few others. But the styles you see are always representative of local history and political influence. And here in Whiterun, what we primarily see is wood and dragon iconography. If it's carved in support beams or as individual idols welcoming you to a certain building or temple or something, that is definitely the overwhelming theme, and it's for a damn good reason. You see, back in the First Era, which is like a couple thousand years ago or something, the then High King of Skyrim kicked the damn bucket. And with the throne open, guess what happened? Everyone went into a mad scramble for it in a conflict known as the War of Secession. Typical. But a very devious dragon known as Numenex took advantage of this chaos, and he started flying around, eating people, burning villages, and just generally causing a bunch of problems. It was in that moment that the then Jarl of Whiterun, a Nord named Olaf One-Eye, stepped up to the plate. Now this is where the details fall apart and no one knows the whole truth of what occurred, but legends say Olaf defeated this dragon alone. Then, using the Thu'um, or the dragon language, coerced Numenex to come with him back to Whiterun, where he would imprison the dragon in the halls of Dragon's Reach for the rest of his dragon life. More so, that Dragon's Reach was just a normal building before this event, and Olaf constructed a massive steel trap to hold a dragon on its back porch. It is his head mounted over the throne after all, so there is some truth to it. This incredible feat earned Olaf, understandably, a ton of fame and praise, and very swiftly ended the War of Secession, with Olaf taking the throne. That's a great way to shut everyone up, isn't it? Just kill a dragon real quick and don't say shit. But this is how Dragon's Reach earned its name. Add in the long traditions and legends of dragons in Skyrim as a whole, and you have everything you need to give you this motif locally. But all of what we see in-game is also very much based on real architectural styles, especially one called Dragastil, also known simply as Dragon Style. This branch of design started popping up in Norway in the 19th century and very proudly attempted to recapture the ancient traditions of building and art across all of Scandinavia. The most prominent features being steep roofs, exposed timber walls and support beams, and of course, tons of decorations using carved dragons and dragon heads made out of wood. But I would say that Whiterun is kind of a combination of Dragastil, Bethesda's own styles that they were coming up with, as well as just traditional architecture of Scandinavia, the old stuff. For instance, I think this building here, the Borgernstave Church in the Western Fjords, looks super similar to parts of Dragon's Reach especially. You got that tall, stacked up, yet thin kind of design, which I believe comes from the basic attempt to have snow slide off the sides of the roof and not build up on top. Now, I don't want to forget to mention this, as I know it's kind of a common thing, but I always personally enjoy it, is that Whiterun exists in its very own cell. That means whenever you enter the gates or fast travel here, you're actually teleported to a unique environment where only the fully built city resides. So if you do a little console command foolery and take a look at the Whiterun that exists in the overworld, I mean, it's a Nintendo 64 game, but there's just enough of the detail, those architectural features and themes to be recognizable from a distance. It's awesome. Bethesda messes up tons of stuff with their games. That is no secret, I'm the first to admit it. But I do think that the art, architecture, design, stuff like that actually makes it into the game is often pretty fantastic and well informed. But now, gotta take the gloves off, baby, because I gotta comment on the city's size.
Ooh, that's kind of small.
It's absurdly small to be one of the main hubs of an entire province. Pretty pathetically small, if you ask me. And that is something that plagues nearly every single city in Skyrim. There are, of course, mods that seek to remedy this. I recommend JK's series, but there are less than 20 proper buildings here. 20. That's like half of my block I live on, man. Look, I don't need it to feel realistically massive at all, but 20, that's just insane to me. That wonderful sense of scale that I have mentioned a few times is somewhat thrown to the wind when it comes to the urban planning that the game designers did. Look at the way a game like The Witcher 3 does cities. It's so impressive. Bethesda, just take a few notes. You don't even have to fill out the whole page.
By the order of the Jarl, stop right there.
Okay, I'm good. I didn't want to bash too hard, but I do want to know, do you agree with me? Do you think if Whiterun was double the size, it would be a cooler place? Or do you like that smaller, compact nature of it, and that's why it's cozy? What about with the other cities? By the way, if you're answering these questions out loud, I can't hear you. You're watching a video. Alright, moving on. Now I know this isn't one of my character study videos, but what would a city be without some people? So we have to mention them. The shop owners, beggars, religious nutjobs, kids, leaders. Well, Whiterun is home to 74 named characters, which, once I sat down and counted, was a few more than I expected, if I'm being honest. But to talk about any of these people, we must first cover the sort of factions that exist within the city walls. You know, what's going on here right now? Well, where better to start than with the companions, as I mentioned earlier. Old Jorvaskr is now home to a fascinating group of weirdos that you as the player can join up with. This is essentially Skyrim's version of the Warriors Guild, and they all fight in the memory of the original founders of Skyrim. Here you meet awesome characters like Farkas, Kodlak Whitemane, and tons others, while you uncover the underbelly of lycanthropy in Whiterun. The companions feud with the Silver Hand faction, stuff that goes back to the Second Era and is shrouded in a ton of controversy and bloodshed and mystery. Hell, you yourself can become a werewolf. But the other main thing going on in town is a bitter feud between two ancient families, the Battleborns and the Greymaids. Both of these clans trace their lineage back to the original 500 companions legitimately, and are currently beefing with each other big time over the Skyrim Civil War. Each side has some great dick-ass characters that try to convince you that they are right and the other guys are wrong, with various quests involved. Honestly, I think this is possibly one of the more underrated storylines in the entire game. I really enjoy it. Then up top, of course, you have Jarl Balgruuf and his court in Dragon's Reach, the legendary wizard Farengar, whose voice can never be removed from your memory banks once you hear it.
Come to Dragon's Reach to discuss the ongoing hostilities, like the rest of the great warriors?
The rude-ass steward, Proventus Avenici, this guy is such a prick. Then there are all of the merchants that fans have grown to love over the years. Avenici's daughter, who's not a prick, she's awesome. Bellathor's creepy ass.
Do come back.
The crazy publicly preaching priest praising Talos very loudly 24/7. And you can never forget the iconic Whiterun guards, whose voice lines have been like printed on fucking aprons and stuff by now.
I used to be an adventurer like you, and I took an arrow in the knee.
And last but not least, the less important characters, my favorite, the NPCs, man, the connective tissue, barkeeps, bards, and just random named citizens. And I know you've been waiting for it, that includes Nazim, the biggest turd, nay, the biggest piece of shit in all of Skyrim, who flexes his wealth and status on you constantly, even after you have literally saved the world. Please, Nazim, just respect me, please. What do I have to do? And don't worry, I'm absolutely gonna make a video on him someday. He deserves it. It'll be a hit piece. But all of these citizens have their own little schedules, places that they like to walk, sit, radiant dialogue that's meant to draw the player into the conversations to learn more about the local issues, politics, and characters. The people, though, really are what make Whiterun Whiterun. They are the blood running through its veins. So many of the things that make it a memorable place are legit just things that people say to you millions of times.
I don't claim to be the best blacksmith in Whiterun. Jorland Greymane's got that honor.
Some may call this junk. Me, I call them treasures.
Come by Bellathor's shop at the market. I'm sure we've got something you need.
What's the matter? You can't stand the sight of a strong Nord woman?
And so many of them come off as like annoyed or just straight up rude. It's hilarious. So I guess the conclusion of this is, most Whiterunners are kind of assholes. Really though, I'm not memeing. Walk around and experience it for yourself. And as I famously said to my brother way back in 2011, I got haters in Whiterun, man. So we have established how much time you are sort of forced to spend here at the beginning of Skyrim, but as the game goes on and you explore all of the major and minor quest lines, you are likely going to be racking up those Whiterun hours big time. Narratively, you are brought back here several times, but most notably, toward the end, you get to use the contraption on the back porch of Dragon's Reach just like Olaf One-Eye did to capture your very own dragon. But the other main thing Whiterun finds itself involved in heavily, to the surprise of absolutely no one, is the Civil War questline. This feels very much like the second biggest plot thread in the entire game, as the Stormcloaks and Imperials are facing off, split on who should control Skyrim. To be honest, side note, it's a massively disappointing thread for me that fizzles out about halfway through, but Whiterun, of course, is a large part of the action. Controlling Whiterun means controlling the entire province, controlling trade, immigration, and more. And by the time we come along, Jarl Balgruuf has remained the only neutral Jarl left. The Imperials are pressuring him hard to join up with them, and the Stormcloaks are threatening to attack the city the moment that they do. So things are rather tense, to say the least. But when you bring that questline along far enough toward its end, regardless of which side you have chosen, the battle for Whiterun ensues. Man, it is pretty damn cool to see this war-torn version of the city. Fortifications and stuff, dead guys in the streets, it's hardcore. Of course, as I mentioned earlier, the Battleborns and Greymanes have very strong opinions and ties to this matter. So if when you started your playthrough you decided to play as a clown and you side with the Stormcloaks, Vignar Greymane will actually take over as the new Jarl. I think it's really cool when video games take familiar and cozy areas, like a city, and transform or destroy them in some way. It can be a really effective way to make the player feel the impact of a particular moment or event. A stripping of innocence, so to speak. Like, damn, they better not mess with Bellathor's general goods. I gotta steal some stuff from there when this is all over. But Whiterun is also home to various well-known side quests, like the Redguard dudes looking for a woman in town who you can either turn in or help out, as well as the really cool little one surrounding the Gildergreen tree having been struck by lightning. You get to choose to either heal it or plant a new sapling. And then my favorite, the Whispering Door, a Daedric item quest where you can acquire the Ebony Blade, a wicked weapon made by Mephala, Daedric prince of murders, lies, and deception. Who knows how, but at some point before we show up, this came into the possession of Balgruuf, and he attempted to destroy it in the Skyforge, but it didn't work, so he just hid it away in his house. That's a terrible idea, my man. But overall, for a small, pretty vanilla fantasy city, there is a surprising amount tucked away to explore and experience, especially that first time through. Now, one small note on player fantasy. As an open-world RPG enjoyer, maybe you're the same way, I am an absolute completionist. I'm insane. I want to see it all. I want to do it all. I want to collect every single item and essentially become God. But when my character's work is done, the villains are slain, the wars have ended, my treasury is full, and the Dragonborn character has reached a ripe old age, knees start creaking a little bit, I personally really like the fantasy of settling down in a quiet place just like this. Some may want their massive vampiric palace or mod or something to appreciate all the clout that they have gained, but man, to me, the idea of this legend just retiring to little Breeze home to live out his days, it pleases me deeply. That is what I did on my first ever playthrough, which of course is always going to be the most impactful. And to this day, I almost feel like that home and that city belongs to my original character. So out of respect, I now live elsewhere in my playthroughs so that the legend of Blue Wiener Man can live on forever. So one tradition I would love to establish in the Worldpedia series is to always pick a favorite nook, a little spot, big or small, that I just like for whatever reason. And in Whiterun, that is easy, boy. For me, it's sitting around the fire in the Bannered Mare. I honestly always forget that there are 2 inns in town, this one and the Drunken Huntsman, but no one goes there, dude, come on, it's weird in there. But the Bannered Mare, whew, incredibly cozy to me. You can pull up, grab some grog, hang out by the fire, beat the snot out of Uthgren, then just space out, listen to my boy Mikael sing about Ragnar the Red, maybe help that Redguard lady or ignore her for another couple hundred hours of game time. I just adore sitting here, imagining the sun going down outside, the crisp, thin evening breeze as the stall owners are all closing up for the night. This is it, boys. This is gaming. From the history, to the people, to the places, quests, sights, and sounds, Whiterun is something that once you experience, you simply will never forget it, even if you aren't the biggest fan. I think all of the pieces of the puzzle come together in a way that is so distinctly Skyrim, if that makes sense. It's so cool and epic, but then slightly janky and disappointing upon closer inspection, but at the end of the day, you still keep coming back with a smile on your face, eager to experience it all over again. I think in any super popular video game, locations like Whiterun are special and need to be treasured. Think of others like Firelink Shrine, Lumbridge, the Ebon Hawk. Millions and millions, maybe hundreds of millions of people have all experienced the very same version of these places that I have. My Whiterun, that I know so well I could navigate with my eyes closed, is your Whiterun too. Now that is pretty damn cool to me, man. It all began with a stone statue, a great bird perched on a towering rock. People came and people stayed. The history of the Nords in Skyrim in many ways begins with Whiterun. In the wake of bloodshed and war, an attempt to claim a new home, a place that Ysgramor and his people could come to rest. And for us, Whiterun is the very same thing. A place to take a break from the dangers of the world, from the action and the burden of prophecy that has fallen on our shoulders. A city that gives us a chance to recharge, resupply, take a breath, and suit up for the next adventure. And always remember, a Nord's last thoughts should be of home. Thank you all so much for watching and listening to the end. I am very, very excited for all that this series has in store moving into the future. So you gotta let me know down below, where do you want to go? No game or place is off limits. I'll take you to a Mario Kart track if you want it. But that is all I got today, my friends. Thank you again so much for the support, and I will see you all very soon. Until next time, peace.